Hello, hello.
Hi guys. Welcome. I am just going to share this to the Tribe Community Facebook page, which if you're not a member of, you're welcome to join. Of course, Tribe is spelled with 2 I's. There we go. Little buttons. Okay. We're good to start.
So it does. Okay, this is day 15.
Yes, it is.
We've covered, I think, lots of really cool, good territory. So hopefully you've been along this journey with us. If you have been along this journey, we've done 3 lots of 5 days. And the first was about regulation, second values, and this last third is getting important shit done. And the 5th of each of the 5 days, we've done something relational. So when we talked about regulation, we talked about co-regulation. And when we talked about values, we talked about how do you navigate differences in values. So in this one, we want to talk about, well, how do you make shit happen with other people? And why is it so hard?
Why is it so hard?
Why is it so hard? It's not always so hard, but I think it can be, and often is. So, as with all of the themes that we've explored, of course, being regulated is really important, and dealing with the regulation of others is really important. So, knowing how to help others co-regulate, and knowing how to ask for others to help you co-regulate. So, I think that's really foundational. And understanding values, why am I engaging with this person? What's the value for me? And often it's just connection and just kind of being with others. And often it's to make stuff happen, to build a life together like Prem and I are doing, or create a business together, or whatever it is, raise kids together. So understanding kind of why we're doing things, what our values are, and where our values differ. And even when we have the same values, often there's kind of subtle variation in those values. And as we go through the journey, we start to kind of get clearer on those subtle variations. So all of those previous sessions have lots of great stuff talking about how to do this, and it's really, really important.
And they all have practices with them, other than the overview days.
And they all have practices, totally.
Yeah. If you want to be able to access all of the practices together without having to go and find them, just go to our go to YouTube. And look for Tribe with 2 I's on YouTube, and you'll see that there's a playlist that is all the guided meditations all in order. Or if you want to see the playlist of the 15 days with the sequencing, so the day of the discourse and then the practice follows directly afterwards. So yeah.
Nice. So this question, why is it so hard to kind of work with others? So I think what I've just said already starts to answer that. Of course, other people and us too, we get triggered, so we become dysregulated because of things, and quite often that's to do with our history and having differences of values, and we don't even realize there's a difference in values means that we're not actually properly aligned, and so that kind of makes it hard to work with others. So getting more into kind of other territory of why it's hard to work with others, well, an important part of it is around how we actually kind of make commitments together. So if I'm going to make something happen with another person, I need to actually be able to say that I'm going to do a certain thing, or just kind of be a particular way. I'm going to, whatever it is, show up on time to our meetings, and if we're going to be able to work effectively together, well, then there needs to be this kind of trust that my commitments are going to be met. So this integrity piece, which has been an important theme across all of the kind of the values section in particular, becomes really important in our ability to work with others. So, and on the other side, a really important part of that is, well, how do we elicit commitments from other people? And this can be kind of tricky territory, because often we think we've elicited commitment, but the other person hasn't necessarily fully made the commitment. Or they might have made a commitment, but it's it's coming from a place of obligation. It's coming from a place, oh, they really want to do this, and all of my socialization kind of subconsciously has me going, well, I should do the thing because, you know, that's what a good person would do. But kind of, I don't necessarily really want to do it, you know. And then there's this kind of, it comes with kind of baggage in a way. I've made a commitment, but it's kind of got a little bit of resentment built into it because I don't actually really want to do the thing. So I'd love to kind of pause here, some of your thoughts, and I maybe add some examples to them to kind of help illustrate.
Yeah, this is so important.
Yeah.
Being able to collaborate is so important and not easy. It's, there's some simple structures to follow, but they're not easy. So, because, you know, people's emotions are involved and we have differences in values and how to navigate difference. We do have a pretty good practice on that though. So if you want to check that one out, it's in the playlist. So a couple of things that I want to add is how we come to an agreement and in a decision-making process. And that often, well, because most of us are enculturated into a way of handling decision-making processes that are not collaborative, so that they tend to be a power over move. That's how we are with nature. We see a lot of that around us. It's typically how parents have been with their children, unless they're switched on and evolved. But, you know, that's it's not typical. And so a power over move is when I make a unilateral decision, when I say what I am going to do, even though it's a we. So there's that, and that will create, that can create, and usually will at some point create some fallout, because nobody likes to be coerced. Nobody likes to have power over them. People like to feel like their dignity has been respected in a decision-making process, and we can do it really unconsciously. You know, I know I can, where I don't intend to do power over, but I am. I'm making a decision that is not actually mine to make because there's a we, and so I want to speak about that. Not right now, but I think that's something that I think is important in this piece. I think I'll pause there. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and we're getting into the territory of power, which of course is super inherent, built into kind of being human. We constantly have hierarchy that we're dealing with, you know, and an obvious context there is kind of a work context where there's a clear power hierarchy, but then there's kind of, even in just social groups, there tends to be kind of a pecking order that starts to emerge, and a lot of the time it's very implicit. You know, we're not really taught how to handle power kind of particularly constructively. You know, and ideally, the person who kind of has the most context should actually, in a way, have more input into what decision is going to be made. You know, so, you know, if I, for example, I'm going to invest a whole bunch of money into somebody's business, well, it's like, for me, that money, I have the most context around. I have the context of like how I made it and what it means to me to lose that money. So of course, I should have more power in that kind of context. And that's a pretty clear example, but there's kind of other less clear examples, you know, like who has maybe the kind of more experience doing the thing. Like Prem has more experience in sales than me. So I'm going to want to defer to her making decisions about how we, you know, approach doing sales as part of our business. So how we actually negotiate power, I think, is really, really important. And then how does that play into how we kind of make decisions with each other? You know, and it ends up being a bit of paradox in here, because I think it's great for all of us to kind of be powerful and assert ourselves strongly and offer leadership. So how do you go about doing that in a way where it is more of an offer? what about if we do this? What do you think of that idea? You know, and then you can kind of get into the values type conversation, which we talked about in the video about that. And so that kind of process of how we are actually kind of coming to the decision, you know, and making commitments and agreements is like super, super important. Yeah.
A piece around how, like, you know, let's say I really want something, and you know, where you are and where I need you to be able to make this thing happen, there's a gap. You know, and it's interesting to look at, you know, what when we try and do something to move another person from where they are to where we want them to be. And this can happen in collaboration. Well, that's not collaboration. Again, that's manipulation. And we might not realize that it is, but at any point in time where we are trying to move somebody from where they are to where we want them to be, without their consent, without it being explicit. Right now, I am, you know, attempting to move you from where you are to where you want to be, and I'm going to do it like this, you know, for example. All the myriad of ways that people can try and influence somebody under the radar to move where they are so that they agree with them or do what they want them to do. These are all ways that eventually you end up paying for. So whilst you might move somebody from A to B, now it'll bite you in the ass later, because nobody wants to be moved by somebody else, right? They want to feel that they came to a decision on their own. So it's tricky territory. You know, this is why we laughed about at the start, you know, those pesky humans, because, you know, just be easier if I could just do what I want to do. And it requires development and elegance to actually know how to be relational with somebody and move towards something that you really want. And a move that you can make is, this is something that I really want. For you to give that to me, like, what would you need? That is not unilateral decision making. That's shared power. This is where I acknowledge that you actually too have power, and that I'm not going to give you an ultimatum if you don't do what I want. I'm not going to do it anyway. I'm not going to try and manipulate you to do the thing that I want under the radar. I'm being overt about what it is that I want, and I am including you. So it's like there's no hiding. There's a full admission of my desire, or there's a full admission of my motivation, and then I'm including you in the process so that you get to move you from A to B on your terms. And that's, you know, you might make a request and I can choose whether I agree to that or not. But then if I don't, you still have your dignity intact. You haven't been manipulated, coerced, threatened, tricked in any way. And you've been respected. And actually, I think that regardless of the context, that's how I think it's an elegant way and an emotionally mature way to treat others, even when they're your employees, even when you're the investor. Like, it is respectful and honoring of people's dignity. And if you don't do that, it will bite you in the ass later, because people feel resentment, and when people feel resentment, then they don't show up. Then they go into procrastination and avoidance. And then you're dealing with that. And it's this whole lot of noise then, which wouldn't have needed to be there if you had have dealt with the thing at the very beginning, so that the person isn't then in a covert way trying to fight back for their power and dignity.
Yeah. And like, I think there are, in kind of a minority of circumstances, times where, you know, we might actually kind of make a decision when there's disagreement, if we have the power. Like, for example, my daughter at one point was just not eating right, and I think she was really suffering from it. And I kind of ended up saying, honey, you have to eat your vegetables. Like, I did kind of draw the line there. But I tried to kind of be explicit as I could about the context which would have me making that call, so I wasn't kind of taking away from her dignity. I'm like, hey, it's my job as your dad to make sure that you're looking after yourself properly. You know, that's a context in which I kind of, it is appropriate for me to assert my power in a way that's kind of a little bit coercive in a sense, but I'm trying to kind of still be as respectful to her as I possibly can, you know. And in another context for me is when I've been a boss, you know, and and we've had to make a decision to go in one particular direction, you know, and a report won't agree with me, and I'm like, okay, like I understand you disagree, and I'm going to make a call in this instance, you know. And I think, you know, there's times where having clear power structures make it easier to kind of do those types of things. But how do we make that kind of explicit? I think that's really important, because if we make it explicit, then we can kind of make object of it, not kind of be had by it, not kind of have potential hidden stuff that's occurring as part of it, you know. And maybe there might be some kind of hurt and possible resentment around it, and if we can kind of go, well, I understand that you mightn't like this, and I want to, you know, hear from you, and I do expect you to actually, you know, commit to the decision that we've been making here. So like pretty interesting territory with all of this. You know, Amazon famously has this phrase, disagree and commit, you know, to try and have that kind of openness of dialogue within an organization, but still people like following leaders. But
I want to clarify that it doesn't, I'm not necessarily speaking about agreement.
uh-huh.
Like, you don't have to agree that my decision is the right decision. You might not agree that it's how we do it. But for you to agree to doing it, for you to move with me, what is it that you would need? You know, so that there's an inclusion of, you know, curiosity about impact. I'm not suggesting that we, if you don't agree, then we can't move. Agree on what my move is. And, you know, this is where the elegance is, right? It's when people feel respected, when they feel cared about, they trust leadership. They're more likely to trust leadership. That's certainly true with children. They're not going to, they don't need to fight for their dignity because they feel respected. And a child-parent relationship's a different power balance, isn't it? Because whilst they are equally valuable, there's certain limits that parents have to put in place to ensure the safety of the child and the well-being of the child. So, yeah.
It's all very interesting territory. So this territory, I think, is a big part of like why it's so hard to work with people, because we have all this kind of power dynamics which kind of can feel complex and lead to resentment and be confusing to work with. Another key part of what has it be hard to work with people, very connected to what we were just talking about, is kind of where people quite often can be quite flaky, right? So I was kind of started to speak to that at the beginning, where people won't necessarily do what they say they're going to do. So like lack of accountability is actually, I think, a massive thing. And I've certainly experienced a lot in my organizational life. Just things fall through the cracks a lot of people not really doing what they say they're going to do, and they're not kind of call out on it. And it's like, it's the same in our friendships and our relationships. And of course, generally we don't want to hold other people accountable because it feels awkward. It's kind of like, you know, I'm calling you out here and I want to be liked, you know, and you might be my friend and I don't want you to feel upset with me. And actually you haven't done some things that you said you were going to do, and it's impacted the relationship, and I'm kind of sweeping it under the rug, and it's actually eroding our relationship gradually, you know, if it continues. And it's particularly an issue if it's a collaborative relationship where we're trying to make stuff happen together. So like how to address that territory, how to actually call people out when they're not doing what they said they do and hold them accountable, I think is a really important skill. And to do it with respect, but to say, hey, like, not cool. Like you said you were going to do the thing and you didn't. And it has me like, you know, I might have some inquiry, like, can you help me understand why you didn't do that thing? Because quite often, you know, there will be a context, and understanding that context will let me then kind of negotiate commitments in a way that has more likelihood of them actually occurring. But if it continues, I probably do want to kind of, in a way, escalate the conversation, and knowing how to do that, like, so I don't jump straight to like, you didn't do what you said you were going to do, but like start more gently and gradually, like, hey, now this is the third time you said you weren't going to do the thing. And when last time we talked about that, you said you would, you know, so knowing how to kind of escalate gradually the conversation to the point of then like, hey, whatever it is, I have a value that my friends, my collaborators, promises and you're not, and I don't know if I want to keep working with you. That kind of might be the towards the end of the kind of escalating the conversation, and then at some point I think it is appropriate for us to walk if people aren't kind of being in integrity. Thoughts?
Always good to have those conversations when you're regulated.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
You know, check if there's the capacity for play, because that's a pretty good indicator of whether you are regulated enough or not to have those types of conversations. Things can seem a lot bigger than they really are when we're dysregulated. We can say things like always and never, very dangerous territory. Know if you're saying that, you're just triggered, and it's really not ideal to be having a conversation, because it's an expression of how your brain is perceiving something, you know, and our brain loses access to important data like how many times or for how long for, and blanket statements are an indication that the brain now is kind of really narrowed in, and it does seem like forever, it does seem like never, it does seem like always, because that's all we are zoned in on. So, you know, if you're part of a conversation where that's happening, you can, if it's yourself saying those things, you can call a pause for yourself, and if those things are being said, you can call a pause for yourself, because, you know, you can own that would have you being triggered, and that would have you shouldn't be in the conversation. Don't call pauses for other people. That's not appropriate. But, you know, you can call a pause for yourself because of how you're reacting to what's happening. That's really, again, honoring another person's dignity and your own, and not trying to control them, like get them from A to B where you want them to be. So don't have those conversations if you're dysregulated. Notice how much curiosity you feel, really, to understanding where the other person's coming from, and to reveal. I mean, it's obviously in different contexts. Like in an organizational context, you know, really that's your jam, Carly, and that's, you know, that world, and I wouldn't be speaking myself to those contexts because I'm not familiar with those contexts. It's a whole other playing field where I don't know the rules in the same way, but I do know in terms of relationships and parent-child relationships that yeah, having conversations where we reveal. So on the one of the lives that we did on values, where we share what our emotion, or we share what emotion was occurring, we do our work first to identify what the emotion is that we're feeling and what that reveals to us about what our value is and what the concern is. And we also talked about revealing, like first looking at our reactions to other people. So my reaction to you not doing this thing, what do I then do to try and cope with my reaction to that? And what is that helping me to avoid in me? You know, and by doing that, that gets me to the crux of really what's happening for me. And I can just share that. You know, I feel concern about whatever it is, losing the relationship. I feel concern about losing the connection. I feel concern about whatever it is, the actual concern, the thing that you really value. And yeah, you can inquire as to what's going on with the other person, but really revealing what's really going on over here. Obviously not in a work context, I don't think that's appropriate. But to be revealing of ourselves is a much better move, a much more relational move than really our assessment of the other person, what we think about their behavior, and, you know, kind of calling hard lines with people. It's not going to create environments or engagements that feel connected and safe. So when somebody's done something wrong, when they've been imperfect, if there is a tone of shaming, or a tone of you're bad, a tone of judgment, I don't like what you're doing, what you can know is that you're less likely, unless the other person is you know, really well boundaried and they're kind of very regulated, you know, perhaps they will be able to hear you there. However, you're more likely to get a defensive reaction from somebody, particularly if you've said to them, there's this thing that I want to talk to you about, which I think is a good thing to do. But what you can know is when people have had trauma histories of getting in trouble, either at school or with their parents, and they've been very dysfunctional interactions that have been very shaming, that can really trigger somebody into a flashback. So they're showing up to the conversation as if they've been backed into a corner. Now, it's, you know, not suggesting that you would have backed them into a corner, but they are in a memory where they were backed into a corner. So I'm not suggesting that you don't speak to the thing that's arising for you. I'm suggesting that you do, but doing it in a way where you really own what's going on for you, what it brings up for you, and as less as you can say, the better. Like without getting very, very wordy, without going into all the meaning that you make up about it. All of that stuff, guys, is extra. And if somebody's agreed to show up to a conversation, I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they sell past the sale. Like once somebody has agreed to show up to a conversation with you, they're sold. Like as in when you shared, hey, there's this thing that's happened that really matters to me, and it's a really important conversation that I have with you. Can you show up for that with me? If they say yes, they're there. You've already sold them. And I think people make a mistake when they don't shift their inner embodiment from that moment forward with the person. When they keep pushing, it creates, and I can go there, and it never works, you know, unless I'm sitting with the person who I'm sitting with is a well-resourced, very emotionally mature adult. It creates erosion from the beginning. So rather than getting stuck in perfectionism, which can have people avoiding and procrastinating having important conversations, you can always clean it up. You can always say sorry. So, you know, the alternative to this is not doing it at all. But as much as you can, if you can just look at what was the emotion that I felt in reaction to what happened. What does that emotion, and watch our emotion discourse video, and we have a practice for that as well, to identify what would be the value that sits underneath there, and share that. Share the what comes up for you once you learn that, and then make a request. Much more kind of simple conversation with less wording. You're much less likely to get into dangerous waters of blame, shame, any of that stuff that somebody can have their heckles up, you know, listening for that.
Yeah. Adding a little bit to what you're saying. So, like when we talked about dealing with differences in values, like revealing our own values and owning our own experience is really important. And also having that inquiry into another person. So, like I kind of was saying before, if someone hasn't been kind of saying what they're going to do, like having some curiosity about it and trying to understand, like maybe they see it differently, or maybe their understanding of what they was going to do was different to yours, right?
Or maybe they're just like going through something, right? And they're actually not able to show up as you need them to. And then that's really good information for you, so that then you can reassess, you can reset expectations.
Yep. So like having that sense of care and respect, I think, is really important. The other aspect of this, which I think we've kind of been pointing to, but haven't said so explicitly, is getting really concrete in our agreements. So this is kind of where I think we often aren't so good at making agreements. We don't get specific enough. And so getting really specific about, well, this is exactly what it's going to look like and when we're going to do it. Like, of course, this is super, super important in the business world, not necessarily as important in the friendship world, but I think still important. You know, it's funny having just been in Sri Lanka, where there's been kind of quite a lot of examples of miscommunication, you know, and that was kind of really struck me, you know, and it's so actually easy to create miscommunication, you know. So, and this then is kind of in the whole territory of what I think of as contracting. How do I effectively contract an agreement with another person, you know, and in the contracting going, getting specific enough, you know, and even kind of whatever it is, sending it a follow-up in an email or a text message about, you know, what the thing is going to be, you know, and then if there is an accountability conversation, it's a lot clearer, you know, and then it's not about kind of having value judgments of the other person. It's just about the data, you know, kind of, you said you would do this thing, you know, and we made an agreement and it didn't happen, you know, hey, like, not cool. So,
yeah,
you know, and that keeps the conversation simpler, you know. That still might be the kind of emotions that come up, but I can just name that one specific thing that we had actually defined that we would do together.
I think for many people, the idea of being very specific or making a request can have anxiety arise, because it's a form of it's a reach, right? Like, I'm reaching towards you, and you could reject me, you could say no, or you could just not show up, which I will receive as a form of some kind of rejection if I'm looking through the lens of anxiety. And it's really important to practice it. And I say that because the more that we so that is there for a reason, like that feeling of anxiety or procrastination of not wanting to is there for a reason. It's protected you from not re-experiencing times in the past where you have reached and been let down. And I'm talking about earlier childhood times where maybe you actually weren't let down that seriously, but through your 6-year-old eyes, it seemed bigger, you know, it seemed like a heartbreak. So, and so, or it could have been much earlier than that, you know, like cries for being picked up from the cot and just not being received there. The movement of reaching towards another becomes distorted somewhat. The naturalness of it is interrupted. And so being gentle with yourself, when Carly suggests being specific, being gentle, but try, because even though it could have you feel anxious to request and being specific, like for example, I often have people ask me in sessions if they've started a new relationship. This person, I've texted them, I can see they've read it and they're not writing back to me, and I feel anxious. And so it is actually okay to request for somebody to let you know, will you let me know when's a good time for you to reply? It's actually okay to request from people what it is that would have us feel secure in a relationship. And if the other person is a secure figure, they will understand that. They will also be doing it themselves. And so it's nice to be able to get that sort of feedback as to whether somebody is actually developed in their own security, because if they're not, that's just good data for you. That's going to mean you're going to need to hold yourself when you reach and they may feel threat in some way or their own anxiety. That'll be your choice or not, whether you continue to navigate that. But it's by reaching, you actually get the information that you need about whether somebody is going to meet that reach, and that's really important information. So kind of procrastination and perfectionism and avoidance are strategies that we employ to protect ourselves in environments that aren't safe. But we need to actually get that data as to whether we are safe or not, and not keep kind of reliving by allowing these parts to lead for us. And not actually sourcing the accurate, up-to-date data about whether this person is actually dependable or not. And so asking is an expression of secure attachment, as is, when you're asked, showing up for that request and also being accountable on the other side of it. We talked the other day about what does it look like to be that securely attached person for yourself, for your parts. And this is it. You know what? Get resources on secure attachment. Educate yourself, because there's not necessarily many role models for you to observe in their in their secure attachment, but if you can read about it, you can take in the modeling of what secure attachment is and start to do it yourself. And so being specific, making requests, holding accountability, these are actually all examples of secure attachment. This is not just what it's like out there in the corporate world where people are having to keep deadlines and blah, 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 and F that, I'm going to leave it, I don't want to do it. Actually, this is what being a securely attached human being looks like, that we can be dependable for others, and that we will also be responsible by making requests and asking for specifics if that's what we need, so that there's a clear agreement between us.
Like, of course, in the corporate world, the big thing that has all of this territory like collapse is all the power stuff we were talking about. So people
Yes.
find it very hard to say no in the corporate world.
Yes.
You know, because it's not like a, you know, do you feel like you can do this thing? You are able to. It's get this thing done. Like, and even if like I feel like I can or I can't, you know, I feel like I need to say yes. And so the kind of the other side of this is respecting people's no, of course, you know, and then working with that and going through the negotiation of it. The last piece that I want to speak to here is that it's inevitable that we will break some agreements. That's just life. Ideally, we renegotiate them in advance. You know, so hey, you know, that thing that I said I would get to looks like I can't get it to you for another couple of days, or that coffee catch up we're going to do. I'm sorry, but I had something come up. You know, so you know, and I think an important part of integrity is actually being able to effectively renegotiate our agreements with others. And then when we do break our agreements, I think repair is really, really important. So, you know, apologizing effectively. And, you know, this is territory that you've coached people in a lot, and I'd love to hear some of your thoughts.
I'm going to run
repair.
a course.
Yeah.
I'm going to run a course on admission and amends. I got G'd up about that this week, and then one of my friends who's watching reached out to me and said, do it. So I'm going to do it. I just got myself excited and forgot what I was going to say.
Repair.
Well, we did that. Repair was what you were talking
Yeah.
about. And then, but I actually was going to say, I was wondering if I answered someone's question that they asked about, can I give an example of a request? What I'm referring to when I talk about a request. I don't know if I actually answered that question, so I'm going to give an example.
Uh-huh.
So, for example, I'll give you a scenario. So let's say that Carly and I have newly dating, and I feel a little bit anxious. And because that's how I'm wired, and in new relationships, I'm uncertain about whether I'm safe and whether I can rest into the we space, and I'm still acquiring data about that. So I might say to Carly, let's say we're going to a party that's your friends and I don't know them. Now, I might say to Carly, so I'll give you the example of a less functional way of going to get my needs met. So we go to the party, and before the party, I am trying to come across as not being anxious towards you because I don't want you to see me as needy, and so I don't reveal that. And I'd be very sweet and very nice, and so as far as you're concerned, I'm good. We go to the party, and perhaps you think I'm very confident because that's how I occur, actually. And so you see that I'm talking to somebody, so you swan off and do your thing, and you come back, you know, a couple of, maybe an hour later, and I tell you that I'm ready to go, and I feel pretty sullen inside. I feel rejected. I feel hurt that he didn't notice. And I give him the silent treatment in the car on the way home. He doesn't know what's going on. I make up that he's an unsafe person and I can't count on him. Okay, you see where this is going. All right, let's rewind. So me showing up as a secure person for myself, I notice I feel anxious. Okay, and that means I need to slow down here. Slow down. Okay, I slow down and I work out what is happening for me. What do I need? That's a really key question here. What is it that I need? Okay, I need in this period of this evening, I need to feel closeness. I need to experience moments of closeness with this person, and then I'm actually okay for there to be distance, but I need to have experiences of closeness. I need to have experiences of coming in and out of that. So I might say then to Carly something like, hey, whilst we're at the party, can you, I feel a bit nervous about going. Could you stay with me until I find that I'm okay to hang out? Maybe I meet people and I hang out with them, but I may not. That may not happen. Is it going to be okay with you if I stay with you all night? And for you to give me that, what would you need? Like, what would you need to be able to have that, make that happen? So now I'm asking for specifics about what that would look like for him. Or I might say, you know what, I actually know someone at this party, but I still, even though I think I do know someone who's going to be there, I would like for at times for you just to come up to me and maybe squeeze my hand, or take a moment just to like have eye contact with me and check in with me. See, I'm getting specific, right? I'm not saying, can we like hang out tonight? I'm actually letting him know the key things, the specifics, and when that would be appropriate for me. You know, maybe like every 20 minutes, if we're not together, could you just come over and just sort of check in?
And I might be like, that's cool, babe, except when I'm like playing drums, because like this party is going to have like super sick music, and I really want to like be able to just like go in the zone and play the music. Apart from that, you know, so the counter offer and the negotiation.
Right, and then you would say, and like, is there anything that you need before I would go and do that? You know, do you want me to come and check? Yes, could you come in and check in with me if now's a good time for me for you to go off and jam for 20 minutes or whatever for a period of time? That's all I need, for you to check with me if now's an okay time. You know, thanks so much for like bearing with me in the navigating of my nervousness into like being in a new environment. Okay, so I've actually been a securely attached person for myself. I'm also ascertaining as to whether this person can be with me as I'm built. Like that is how I'm wired right now in this example. So this is who I am right now. You know, rather than me pretending that I'm somebody else so that you love me, this is just who I am. And like, this is relevant, guys, in every context. So with friends, you know, like when we don't talk for X amount of time, I notice that I feel lonely and I miss you. I'm going to reach out more to you, but would you be willing to blah, 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 blah? Like check in with me some mornings, you know, or whatever. Like, actually, that's me being a securely attached person for myself. That is not me being needy. That is not me being anxious. That is me being in reality about me and letting you know who I am right now. So I want to like clear that, because I think that revealing with specifics around our requests with people helps us to collaboratively make agreements together about what works for me. What would you need to be able to give that to me? And therefore we co-create together the design of how we're going to play.
I think that's probably pretty good. We've been going for 45 minutes. So.
Oh, that's our longest live so far. Going out with a long one.
That's
so
right.
On the repair piece, I'm going to do a whole thing. Yeah. We're going to do a whole thing that's going to be on repair, amends, admissions. We've got a course that starts tomorrow that goes for 2 weeks. So it is not going to be during that time. Hey, we have 2 spots left. If you would like to participate with us, I think it's the best course that we run, just saying.
So good.
It's the bomb. It's thebomb.com for reals. If you want to read about what it's about, go onto my Facebook page. I've written some stuff there. or reach out to me and I can tell you about it. I will be more than happy to do that. This is it. This is the end of this series. Thanks so much for joining us. For those of you who've joined us for the whole time, thank you, thank you, thank you. And for those of you who are discovering this years later, we're so glad that you're here. These will all be on YouTube forever if you want to go and watch the full playlist. All right, guys.
See ya.
Thanks so much. Bye.